The night I went to meet my date was supposed to be simple, but the moment her mother walked up to my table, my entire life quietly changed in ways I never could have imagined. I had arrived early at the small restaurant downtown, the kind of place filled with warm yellow lights, quiet music, and the soft clinking of glasses. It was the kind of place people chose for meaningful conversations and hopeful beginnings. I had spent the entire day feeling nervous in a strange but exciting way. It had been years since I had gone on a proper date. Life had become too busy, too heavy, too full of responsibilities to leave much room for romance. But that night felt different. I had carefully chosen my shirt, shaved twice just to be safe, and even rehearsed small conversations in my head during the drive. There was something about the possibility of meeting someone new that made the world feel lighter again. And if you believe that kindness, patience, and second chances can completely change someone's life, take a moment right now to like the video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the most unexpected moments carry the greatest blessings. I sat at the corner table near the window, occasionally glancing at the door every time it opened. My date, Emily, had seemed warm and funny during our conversations online. We had talked about books, late-night coffee, and the strange ways life can bring people together. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel a little hopeful. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I checked my phone. No message. I tried not to think too much about it. Maybe traffic was bad. Maybe she was parking the car. Maybe she was just running a little late. But when 30 minutes had passed, that quiet voice in the back of my mind started whispering the truth I didn't want to accept. I had been stood up. The familiar sting of embarrassment slowly crept into my chest. Around me, couples laughed and leaned toward each other across candlelit tables. Meanwhile, I sat alone, pretending to scroll through my phone while quietly wondering why I had allowed myself to hope again. Just as I was about to ask for the check and leave, a woman approached my table. She looked to be in her late 40s or early 50s, dressed neatly in a dark blazer and glasses that gave her a calm, professional appearance. There was a quiet confidence in the way she stood, but also something else, something thoughtful and hesitant. She looked directly at me, as if she had been searching for this exact table. For a moment, I assumed she worked at the restaurant. But then she gently placed her hand on the back of the empty chair across from me and said something that immediately confused me. She told me she was Emily's mother. For a few seconds, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Why would my date's mother be here instead of my date? Had something happened? Was Emily okay? The woman slowly sat down across from me and took a quiet breath, as if she had been rehearsing what she was about to say for hours. She explained that Emily wasn't coming. At first, I felt that same sharp sting of disappointment again, but before I could even react, she continued speaking. She explained that Emily had panicked earlier that evening and decided not to come at the last minute. According to her mother, Emily had recently gone through a painful breakup and had been trying to force herself back into dating before she was truly ready. But that wasn't the real reason the woman had come. Her name was Margaret, and she told me she had come to apologize in person because she hated the idea of someone sitting alone and confused, wondering what they had done wrong. There was something incredibly sincere in her voice, something that made it impossible to feel angry. She spoke calmly and kindly, like someone who had spent many years understanding people. But then she said something I never expected. She told me she had actually been watching me from across the restaurant for a while. She said she noticed the way I waited patiently, the way I didn't complain to the staff, and the way I kept checking the door with quiet hope instead of frustration. She said most people would have left angry after 15 minutes. But I had stayed. And that small act of patience told her something important about the kind of person I might be. At that point, the evening had become so strange that I didn't even know what to say. I simply listened while she continued explaining something deeply personal about her life. Margaret had been raising Emily alone for many years after losing her husband. Life had not been easy for them, but she had worked tirelessly to give her daughter a stable and loving home. However, recently Margaret had been facing struggles of her own. After decades of working non-stop, her health had started declining, and she had quietly begun to worry about the future. Not for herself, but for her daughter. She told me something that surprised me even more. She said she could tell a lot about a person in small moments, how they treat waiters, how they handle disappointment, how they carry themselves when they think no one is watching. And from what she had seen that night, she believed I was someone who understood patience and kindness. The conversation slowly shifted from awkwardness into something unexpectedly meaningful. We talked about life, about the strange turns it takes, about the loneliness people sometimes carry without showing it to anyone else. Margaret shared stories about Emily growing up, about the sacrifices parents quietly make, and about the fear that comes with realizing time moves faster than we expect. Meanwhile, I found myself opening up about my own struggles, about the years I had spent working long hours after losing my own father, about how I had slowly drifted away from friends and relationships while focusing on responsibilities. What had started as a disappointing evening slowly transformed into one of the most honest conversations I had ever had with a stranger. At one point, Margaret smiled gently and said something that stayed with me for a long time. She said sometimes the wrong door leads us exactly where we need to go. The night continued with simple conversation, shared stories, and quiet laughter. Eventually, we both realized the restaurant was beginning to close. Before leaving, Margaret apologized one more time for the strange situation. But strangely enough, I no longer felt disappointed. Instead, I felt like I had gained something unexpected, a reminder that kindness still existed in small, quiet places. A few days later, something surprising happened. Emily sent me a message. She explained everything her mother had told me was true. She had panicked and backed out of the date at the last minute, but after hearing from her mother about our conversation, she felt embarrassed and wanted to apologize personally. But the message contained something else. She thanked me. She said her mother hadn't stopped talking about the conversation they had afterward. Apparently, Margaret had come home that night feeling hopeful for the first time in months. That simple dinner had reminded her that good people still existed. Over the following weeks, Emily and I slowly began talking again, not as a forced date, but as two people getting to know each other honestly. And strangely enough, the real connection that formed between us didn't start that night. It started because of her mother. Margaret would occasionally send messages asking how we were doing, sometimes sharing small pieces of advice about relationships and life. Over time, what had begun as an awkward mistake slowly turned into something meaningful. Months later, Emily and I finally had our first real date. But this time, there were no expectations. Just two people who understood that life rarely follows the plans we make. Sometimes the moments we think are failures become the beginning of something far better than we imagined. And if this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment right now to like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more stories that remind us how powerful kindness can truly be. But before this story ends, I want to ask you something special. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever experienced a moment where something that seemed like a disappointment turned into a blessing later? Because sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin with the words we never expected to hear. And sometimes, the person who changes your life isn't the one you planned to meet. It's the one who simply shows up when you least expect it.